Glenn, you've lived an incredible life, a productive one, but just representing some powerful ideas, some powerful ideals. But life comes to an end.
Yeah.
Do you think about your death? Are you afraid of it?
Well, it is a really interesting coincidence that you'd pose me that question because I'm coming from a funeral. Uh, Today is Sunday. On the preceding Tuesday, 5 days ago, I was at the funeral of Eugene Wesley Smith, who was my brother-in-law. He was my sister's husband. My sister, Leonette, passed away in August of 2021. Her husband has died at the age of 68 in April of 2022, and I was at his funeral. He died suddenly of a heart attack that came completely out of the blue. He seemed to be in perfect health. He was a magnificent human being. I could go into the details, but take my word for it. He was a businessman, a steel trader, metals trader. He would buy and sell. He worked mostly from his home office. He had clients, counterparties, people he did business with all over the world. He had 3 sons, one of whom is in his early 30s, two of whom are in their late 30s. These are my sister's children. She's deceased. Now he's deceased. The older 2 sons are severely developmentally disabled. And although they're in their late 30s, they're not independently viable. They don't function effectively. They have to be cared for. That responsibility has now fallen to the family, but mainly to the surviving son, who lives with his wife and his 2 young children, and has assumed the responsibility. They've cared at home. My sister and her husband, Eugene Wesley Smith, cared for their disabled sons at home. They didn't want to see them institutionalized. They had some help from programs at the state and social worker and so on, but they mainly took on the burden of caring for them at home. Anyway, I go on at length here, and I don't know how much of this you'll choose to make use of, and it doesn't matter really. I'm just trying to respond to your question. I was asked to offer some remarks at the funeral, and I offered them, and I spoke well of this great man. He was a great man. He had a straight back. He was a stand-up guy. He could be counted on. His word was his bond. He had broad shoulders. He carried a lot of people with him, business associates, family members, and so forth and so on. He had a huge heart. He was a giving and kind person. He had a great mind. He was an intellectual, even though as a businessman, much of his day was taken up with the, minutia of contracts and the details of the order being delivered and not being delivered, of the quality of the product, of the financing, and so forth and so
There
on.
was still a powerful mind there.
Yeah, he was a powerful mind, and he studied. He read books. He was interested in music and art. He's a spiritual seeker. Had been ordained as a child minister in his youth, and while he remained a master of the Christian canon, he also explored Eastern religion and other spiritual paths, and kind of stood above any particular tradition as a man who believed in God, but thought that God manifests himself in many ways to human beings, and that there was much to learn from other religious traditions as well. This is Wesley. We called him Wesley by his middle name, Eugene Wesley Smith. May he rest in peace. 68. That's 5 years younger than I am right now. He dropped dead without any warning. I could too. So,
How did that make you feel? What were the thoughts in your mind leading up to it, having to give that speech in the days that
well,
followed?
first of all, I wondered, what would I say? What would I say? And, there was no way to prepare. And I decided, I rehearsed in my mind this, he had straight back, he had broad shoulders, he had a big heart, he had a great mind, he had a capacious spirit and whatnot. And I used that as a template for making my remarks. But my main thought was, my God, life is precious and life is fleeting. And death is a part of life. My death is a part of my life. And I thought, well, I want to take better care of myself than I do, et cetera, et cetera. But I also thought a lot of this is not in my hands at all. I thought one should have his affairs in order. My brother did not have all of his affairs in order, in the sense that there's a lot of, things are going to probate. There was no will. There's, it's kind of unsettled. I don't want that to happen to my surviving family members. I want to have my affairs such that, should, heaven forbid, I fall over one day and don't get up again, people don't have to scramble about how to take care of things from that point forward.
But as a human, are you afraid? In your own heart?
I'm afraid. Now, I read this wonderful book called The Swerve. It's about Lucretius. It's about The Nature of Things, which is this great classical work from the Roman period by this guy Lucretius. And I'm trying to think of the name of the author, but you could look it up. The Swerve is the book. It won like a National Book Award or a Pulitzer Prize. And it's the history of the recovery of this book by one of these Renaissance Italian people who would go into the monasteries in Central Europe and look through the scrolls, and they discover these classical works from antiquity, which had been lost through the Dark Ages, and they publish and read these works. And Lucretius's great work on the nature of things was one of these books. Poggio Boccalini. I don't remember the Italian guy's name, but this all could be looked up.
Poggio Boccalini.
Yeah.
15th century. 15th century, and the name of the author is Stephen Greenblatt.
Yeah, Stephen Greenblatt. A magnificent book and a terrific story. Anyway, one of Lucretius's points, he was an atheist. I mean, he was a Roman. I mean, he didn't believe in mysticism. And he argued it's irrational to be afraid of death. Why should I fear death? Death is coming to all of us. The point of being afraid, I mean, I'm wasting my time fearing something that I have no ultimate control over. It's irrational to be afraid of death.
Yeah, because you can't predict when it happens. You only know that it happens. So why be afraid? How's that?
And therefore, live every day fully, live every day purposefully, and so on. But these are all just words. I don't want to die. I want to live forever. I'm not going to live forever. I don't want to suffer. I see people suffering. I saw my late wife, Linda Datcher Loury, Dr. Linda Datcher Loury, professor of economics at Tufts University, whom I met in graduate school at MIT, Black woman from Baltimore. We married. We raised 2 sons together. She died at the age of 59 from metastatic breast cancer. And I watched her suffer and I watched her die. And it took a while. And we cared for her at home right up until the very end. She died in our bed with our sons on either side of her, and the dog curled up by the door, the porch door in the bedroom, and she expired. And I watched her suffer and I watched her die. And I don't want to suffer. Who does? I don't want to die. I am likely to suffer before I die. I am likely to see my death coming and to lament it. There's a book by Richard John Newhouse, the theologian, called As I Lay Dying. As I Lay Dying, Richard John Newhouse. He had stomach cancer, and he thought he was dying, and he wrote this book as he lay dying. And then he recovered. He went into remission, and he had another couple of years. He thought he was dying, and he had another couple of years. And I can remember meeting him at a bookstore in suburban Boston when he was on a tour. This was a friend of mine, a theologian and public intellectual. He founded the Institute on Religion and Public Life in New York City, which still exists, Richard John Newhouse. And he's contemplating his own death from the point of view of a Christian minister. He was first a Lutheran pastor, and then he converted to Catholicism, or as he would have put it, I returned to the church because he, thought the Renaissance was over. The Reformation, Richard thought it was over. He says there's only one church, et cetera. Get into theology stuff here. But I'm saying all that to say, I read that book aloud to my wife, Linda, as she lay dying in that bed. I read that book, and it was filled with hope. I mean, it first acknowledged the dread.
Yes.
I lie dying. I don't want to die. I'm a Christian minister. Christ was raised from the dead. I'm supposed to believe in everlasting life. But the fact of the matter is, this is me, and I'm lying here and I'm dying. This is the end of me. How are you going to do anything other than dread the end of me? So let's acknowledge that I don't want to die. Okay. I'm just going to tell you that up front. But that is not the end of my death, is not the end of life. I have lived well and fully. I will go and do my best right up until the end. I will accept what is inevitable, and I will hold out this belief. And he's a Christian minister, so he holds out this belief. And he knows that the belief is not rational. It's not a reasoned, deductive, scientific conclusion. It's spiritual in the most fundamental way. It is something that people hold on to, and they have hope. And he had hope. I don't know if I have that hope. I used to be, but I'm no longer a Christian, and am no longer a theist. Really, I'm with Lucretius there. I mean, there's nothing. There's no magic that's going on here. There's no unseen hand behind the scene that's arranging things. What I believe is that when I look at the natural world, I see the evolution of the species. I see the organic development of the planets. I mean, the Earth is going to not exist in a finite number of years. I think with a very high probability, the sun is going to die. It's going to implode. It's going to go supernova, whatever is going to happen, and there's not going to be any there.